Man, this is weird doing a post-game reaction without being either angry or excited because we just hit a game-winning field goal on Sundays. This is weird. So, I almost said Ohio State. The Browns, they beat the Dolphins 31-6. Great game. Let me mute this really quickly so I can. No one's. There we go. All right. So Browns win. Mike McDaniel's gonna be fired. It won't be too long. That people that were talking about if Kevin Stefanski lost the locker room, and I thought about this too. I was wondering, has Kevin Stefanski lost the locker room? But he hasn't. But a team whose coach has lost the locker room was right there. The Miami Dolphins. It is bad. Mike McDaniel needs to go for them. That locker room is obviously very toxic. And it also doesn't hurt. It also hurts that there's a bunch of key injuries to Jalen Waddle. The Jalen Waddle got hurt. The entire Dolphins team got banged up. Tua got benched today. Quinn Ewers looked okay, but it's Quinn Ewers. There's not really a lot to really say. But not a lot of stuff there. Browns immediately, as soon as I ended up stopping the recording, the Browns ended up 5 minutes later had a pick six in the first play of the second half, so that was fun. Myles Garrett finally gets back, and this is the period of time because we have New England next week, who just blew out Carolina, who's not a great team, but New England is back on the rise. They're in playoff contention. I think they only have 1 or 2 losses on the season. So this was the time, if the Browns were going to get back to being on a hot streak, this was the time to have one of these games. I'm really glad that this game fell where it was, with the whole everyone is wondering what's going to happen with Kevin Stefanski, who's going to replace Kevin Stefanski, people are still talking about now. And this game has snapped everyone back to, all right, let's calm down. Kevin Stefanski obviously has a culture. They're still buying into the culture. And maybe I'm reading too much into it because it's only one game and we're still 2-5. But, it could be worse. It could be worse. So we got New England, who we need this defense to play like they just did. We need this team to be opportunistic like they just were all game this game. And that's exactly the style. If the Browns played like this throughout the entire season, they'd be exactly where the Steelers are right now. Probably not the same record because Mike McDaniel is probably a better coach than Kevin Stefanski, but that's okay. Mike McDaniel is probably one of the top 20 best head coaches of all time. So that's not really much of an argument there. But the style of football the Browns just played today, where their defense is creating turnovers, they're making plays, they're being the Browns defense, and the offense is capitalizing on opportunities. Quinshon Judkins, I think the Browns had 20-something points off of turnovers today, which is insane. Schmidt hit all of his field goals. He has been on fire ever since the Cincinnati Bengals game. And if he can stay consistent like that he's going to be a great kicker for a long time. And I'm really glad about that. Now, do I wish he would have taken one of the field goals that he made today and put them in the Cincinnati game? Sure. But, not a whole lot to really think about there. It's whatever. We still got to play the Bengals at the end of the year. We'll see what happens there, if the Bengals are fighting for a playoff spot or if they're, if they're out of it too. The Browns aren't making the playoffs. I don't think anyone is really expecting the Browns to make the playoffs, nor should have they at the beginning of the season. But, you want the Browns to at least be competitive in games. In the past few weeks, we haven't been competitive. And this was a great game to get your feet back underneath you and play competitive football. This was a momentum builder. This was a confidence builder. So, great game. And also the commentary was also very weird. They were doing a lot, how the Dolphins were saying that they had an easy week this week. I don't know if anyone realized both teams were 1-5. If the Dolphins were 5-1, sure. They're not, though. They're 1-5, and they are right with the Jets for the worst team in the league. And the Browns are right in front of them whoa, New England. And, like, even, like, they're showing New England's highlights here. And I know it was against the Titans, who aren't very good, who also are right in that running. They're also 1-6 now. So, we'll see what happens. I don't know. I think this game could be a game, I think it is in Cleveland too, where New England could be looking ahead and the Browns could trip them up like they did with the Packers this year. So we'll see. Also, Drake May, who has shown himself to be a very good quarterback in the league. Maybe he has a trip-up year or a trip-up game against the Browns defense. So you never know with these games. I would definitely say more than likely. I got to stop switching my hands. But I would say more than likely the Patriots come into Cleveland and they beat the Browns, which is okay. Like, the Patriots have 2 losses on the year, I think they just said. So, not a big deal if the Browns lose that game. But, the games where, like the Pittsburgh game, where I get Pittsburgh is in the lead for the AFC North. It's Pittsburgh, though. They're never as good as their record says. They're never as bad as their record says. It's Pittsburgh. They're always going to be in the middle of the pack, but they get lucky. And they play on margins, which is what we all wanted, or at least what I wanted the Browns to do this year, was play on the margins, but we just haven't had the offense to be able to play on the margins. We've had an offense that's been one of the worst in the NFL so far. But this game, especially for Dylan Gabriel, was a great game to get his momentum back. His first win in the NFL in his career. But I don't know. It depends, because we'll see what happens with this. Could this year be one of those years like the Jacoby Brissett and the Deshaun Watson's first year and then Baker Mayfield's last year? Those 2 years? Is this a year we're going to look back on and be like, oh, if we only made this kick, we would have been right there in the playoffs? Or, didn't turn the ball over. With Baker Mayfield's last year, Baker Mayfield threw like 3 or 4 interceptions on Christmas against the Packers, but the Browns were still in that game and we had a chance to win. So it's like, if Baker doesn't throw those interceptions, we're probably winning that game. And, I don't want to be in the middle of the pack where we're not bad enough to be a team that is getting first-round draft picks, but we're not good enough to make the playoffs. That is the worst. That is the Steelers' place in the NFL. That is the worst place you really can be. So, playing on the margins has its pluses and minuses. If the Browns are going to be really bad this year, great. Get a first-round pick. Get Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana, who looks like one of the best quarterback prospects in this draft class. Get Carnell Tate, because the Browns do have 2 first-round picks this year with Jacksonville, who just got destroyed, and our first round pick, and we're obviously not that great of a team, so we're going to have a early to mid first round pick this year, probably, unless the Browns go on some crazy winning streak. And, it's just one of those things where you got to look at who's available. I really want Fernando Mendoza, and I love Carnell Tate. I know, like, the Ohio State thing in me, probably, but the Browns need a number 1 wide receiver. Now, is Carnell Tate a number 1 wide receiver? I don't know yet. He was never a number 1 wide receiver at Ohio State. That's always been a Jeremiah Smith or a, Marvin Harrison Jr. And you can even throw Emeka Egbuka in there, who was before Carnell Tate in the depth chart, before this year, of course. So you never know what that's going to happen, but look at Emeka Egbuka, who was never the number 1 wide receiver on Ohio State, and he is right there. He's going to be right there when Mike Evans finally retires or gets, like, whatever happens to Mike Evans in a few years. Emeka Egbuka is going to be right there, and he's going to be able to take over the reins in Tampa Bay. And he might have already surpassed Mike Evans for the number 1 wide receiver on Tampa Bay's roster. And, like Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's probably the best wide receiver in Seattle, and his year, where his breakout year, unfortunately he got injured in 2022, but his breakout year in 2021, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave were also there. And even I would like that there was no primary wide receiver that year in 2021. It was Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. There was really no number one guy there. And they all look like number one wide receivers now. Chris Olave looks like more of he's not necessarily a bona fide number one guy, but he has the talent to be a number one guy. Garrett Wilson and Jack Smith-Njigba obviously look like one of the best wide receivers on their teams, if they can stay healthy, because some of those wide receivers had health issues. But anyways, back to the Browns. They need, in this draft class, the Browns need a quarterback. They probably need another wide receiver, and they need offensive linemen. Their defense can probably wait to the later rounds, but this offense needs a lot more attention that they've been getting for the past few years. Now, this is what I also hate. People are like, well, the Browns also had, all these picks in 4 years ago when they had a bunch of picks. Well, all those were not first-round picks. Ever since the Deshaun Watson trade, the Browns did not have those first round picks because they all went to Houston, and Houston used them to recreate the rebuild that team. Now they're struggling now, but they have the young talent to be good. They just need the right pieces in place. They have the foundation now. They just need to build on it. So, they got Will Anderson and they got CJ Stroud. I want that type of, 1-2 combo in the draft. They don't necessarily have to be on offense and defense, but you get my point. I want those both draft picks to hit, the one we have and the one that Jacksonville gave us last year for Travis Hunter. I need that. And speaking of Jackson Smith and Jigba, by the way, he leads the league in NFL receiving yards. So, like I'm saying, best wide receiver in Jacksonville. Or not in Jacksonville, in Seattle. So, the Browns got to figure out a way what they're going to do. Is it a rebuild year, which I think it is. I think this is a rebuild year. Or do they want to play a Pittsburgh style of game? And I know for Kevin Stefanski, he wants to win every game that he's playing in. But, this is a thing that we got to figure out what we're doing. Now, obviously, because we're 2-5, I think that decision was already kind of made for us with this record that we've already accumulated over the season. But that does not mean we can't be competitive with teams, and we can't be physical with teams, and we can't make teams look at us and be like, oh my God, we're coming to play the Cleveland Browns. We have to be ready. Kind of like Kentucky, like I said in my halftime reactions. Kentucky is a team that the week after you play them in the SEC, you are battered, you're bruised, and that's a good week for teams to catch you on an upset. Or if it's a competitive game after it, that's a good week for you to probably lose. If you don't lose to Kentucky already. I know Georgia has a couple of scares against Kentucky the past few years. Texas last week just almost lost Kentucky in overtime. So, Kentucky is always going to be a physical team that's not necessarily good enough to win the SEC, but they are a team to be feared and to be respected. That's what I want the Browns this year. Now, do I want them like that every year? Of course not. Of course, you want the Browns to eventually take that next step, whether that's with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry or not with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. Remains to be seen. Dylan Gabriel also only threw 18. I just saw the graphic here. Dylan Gabriel also only threw 18 passes and had 116 yards. So, and I get the rain, but the fact that he threw over 100 yards and completed 13 percentage, or not 13 percentage, he completed 13 passes out of 16 and threw over 100 yards in a rainstorm is impressive. So, I know people are probably going to say, well, he only threw the passes that were at the line of scrimmage or a little bit above the line of scrimmage. Well, that sucks. That's called being a good play caller. The Browns just blew out the Dolphins, and now we're going to say, well, if Shedeur was in there, he could throw 50 yards and win 100 Super Bowls. No, he's not. The fact that Shedeur Sanders is not in the game means that Dylan Gabriel is better than Shedeur Sanders, okay? Sorry. It's not going to happen. I know some people love Dion and they love Shedeur Sanders and they think that he's our savior. He's not. There's a reason why Shedeur Sanders fell as far as he did in the draft. Now, Could he be a good quarterback? Yes. Can he be a franchise guy? Probably not. But I would love to let him have a year underneath his belt where he knows Kevin Stefanski's system. And that's another thing why I don't want to fire Kevin Stefanski. We have all these rookies coming in. They're learning a system. Quinshon Judkins is thriving under the system. And we all want to fire Kevin Stefanski and basically press the reset button. So this year was basically a complete waste for all the rookies in their development. No, that's dumb. If we fire Kevin Stefanski, we're probably not keeping the same coordinators, which means Jim Schwartz is gone. Who wants to do that? I'll wait. So, after this performance especially, who wants to get rid of Jim Schwartz? Nobody. So, I think Kevin Stefanski, if he doesn't take the next step next year, I think you fire him and you get someone in there. I don't think you fire Andrew Berry at all. I think his job is completely safe. Now, if there's something drastic that happens where it's another really bad trade or another really bad draft class, and even he hasn't even had bad draft classes. He's just not had the first round picks that we've now had for the past this year and then this upcoming draft that we've accumulated now. So you got to figure out a way to develop the rookies, but also make your team better for the future. Develop the rookies, but also make sure you have the right foundation underneath those rookies that is going to make the team better. That's what I meant to say. So, Browns win. Ohio State has a bye, so the next time I will be making these reactions will be for the Browns on next Sunday. Quick little thing for Ohio State. They should be number one going into the Penn State game next week. But I see a lot of these people already counting Penn State as a win. You can't do that. People forget this Penn State team that just fired James Franklin, and I get that they just fired James Franklin. This Penn State team was beating Oregon, who at the time was a top 5 team in the country. I don't think they are right now. I think they're top 10. Was just beating a top 10 Oregon team late in the fourth quarter before blowing it in overtime. So, I get that James Franklin's not there anymore and Drew Aller isn't there anymore. They still have an amazing backfield. They still have a pretty good defense, even though it has failed them at points in the season. It's still a good defense. The wide receivers are not what they used to be, but you cannot overlook Penn State. The last time we overlooked a team like this where they had a down year and their coach was not there anymore and, all these things were happening and it looked like the team was checked out was the Michigan game last year in Columbus. And I don't know about you, but I don't want that to be a loss. I want Ohio State to go 12-0 and beat probably Indiana in the Big Ten championship. And I want Ohio State to be the number 1 seed in the playoff and play Missouri and play Georgia and win the national championship. That's what I want. That is my dream season. Beat Michigan, win the Big Ten championship for the first time since 2020, beat Missouri, beat Georgia. That's what I want. Those are my 4 things that I want Ohio State to do. Of course, you want to beat Penn State because you want to keep the 10-year stretch going where Penn State has not beaten Ohio State, even though they consider it a rivalry game. I've said all that before. But that is my quick little thing for Ohio State. But I will be back, Browns and New England, halftime reactions or post-game reactions, depending on what I do. That'll be in Cleveland. That should be interesting. Going to be a tough game for the Browns. More than likely the Patriots do win, but I just want the Browns to keep it competitive. But until then, go Dogs.